Sorry, I just read a comment right when we came on the air, and it made me laugh from Tristan. And
so unprofessional.
I know. I what can I say? But anyway, welcome, Irish fans, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast.
We have to bring up that comment, though.
Tristan, go ahead. You read it, man.
He said, I saw Vincent Company, so Vincent Company would be all 5 of his children.
A lot of them,
at Costco the other day. It was great seeing him act like a bigger child than his actual children.
I have no idea what he's referring to, so it's just my everyday life, and he's probably right. That's really all there is to it on that one. So thanks, Tristan. That actually made me laugh right off the bat. So I'm Vince. That's Brian over there. That's Brian. We're here to do a podcast. So
we did have a purpose to today's show.
Yes, we actually do.
Let's restart this and try to put on our professional face.
Yeah, right. I know.
Okay, take 2.
Bop. All right. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. I'm the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. That guy right there is Brian Driscoll. He's the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And we have a multitude of things to get to. Let's start with our newsworthy item. The invitations for the Combine came out. And, Brian, take it away.
Yeah, so 5 Notre Dame players were given invites to the Combine. Kevin Austin was invited. Jack Cohn, Myron Tungavaloa, and no surprise, Kyle Hamilton and Kyron Williams. I think we expected Williams and Hamilton. I thought my thing was, how about the other guys? Would we see Heinisch? Would we see MTA? Would we see Kevin Austin, who desperately needed to be at the Combine? Would we see Jack Cohn? Would we see Drew White? Some of those guys got invites, some didn't. Kane Madden wasn't invited. Drew White wasn't invited. Kurt Heinisch wasn't invited, which surprised me a little bit that Kurt Heinisch wasn't invited.
Me too. That one does.
But, he'll get his chance at the pro day to work out. But, obviously 5, that's a good group, and there's a lot to prove. And we'll have a show. Ryan and I will have a show on this here soon where we'll kind of break it down, just kind of what each guy has to prove. Ryan's actually working on an article now for irishbreakdown.com, just kind of going over, sort of what each guy has to prove and how much the Combine can help or hurt some of these guys. And I think the Combine's going to be huge for all those guys. I mean, Jack Cohn had a really nice Shrine Bowl performance. If he can follow that up with a good Combine performance during the throwing sessions and the movement sessions, Kevin Austin has to have a big Combine. Look, I've seen mock drafts with Kyron Williams going as low as the 3rd and 4th round. He's got to have a strong Combine performance. I don't know what it is that makes these people see that, and I don't put a lot of stock in that as if Kyron's stock is falling, because I don't know what NFL teams think. This is just guys that do this for a living on Twitter and different things like that. So no disrespect, because I'm reading it, so clearly I have some interest in it. And the guys that I read were guys that are known people. It's not like some Jimmy Smith, some random guy I've never heard of. Well, I shouldn't say Jimmy Smith, because there's multiple Jimmy Smiths in the NFL. But some guy with some random guy that no one should be paying attention to.
Right.
So at least there's some areas out there where Kyron Williams isn't the potential late 1st, early 2nd round pick we thought he might be. I saw 4 or 5 different running backs going ahead of him. I think part of that is the Senior Bowl hangover that people have, which kind of drives me nuts. They'll say this guy at the Senior Bowl played way better. He's going to go against some other person higher than this other person. Well, you didn't see that other person at the Senior Bowl. So you're arguing like this person did well, this person did nothing because they were junior, that kind of thing. So,
right.
But I think we've always felt that Kyron needed a strong Combine performance to solidify his spot amongst the top 2 or 3 running backs in this draft. So it's going to be interesting. So we'll have a nice long show. We'll go through each one of those 5. We'll do a similar thing for the pro day. Notre Dame's pro day is most likely going to be at the end of March, from what I'm told. They haven't solidified it for sure, but most likely the end of March. And we'll have previews for that. So we'll definitely have some drafts. That's a nice thing about hiring Ryan, is not only is he crushing it in recruiting and doing a great job, and it's only going to get better there. But he's a guy that I took from the draft world. So this time of year, it's like he's like a kid in a candy store.
He's
he's
putting it on a tee,
looking at recruiting film. He's doing draft stuff. It's he's got to be a happy dude. So we'll have some draft stuff on the podcast coming up, and I'd be a fool not to take advantage of Ryan's draft knowledge and just say, hey, no, you're the recruiting guy now. So we're going to take advantage of both.
That's right.
There's no doubt about it. So I look forward to those shows. So, yeah. So that Vince, that's the combine stuff that came out today. I thought that was newsworthy.
Absolutely.
We weren't going to originally talk about this, but I was getting ready to hop in the shower and get ready for the show. And I was like, oh, combine. Let's mention that because it's going to be very interesting to see those guys work out. And we've seen a lot of Notre Dame guys, a lot of Notre Dame receivers especially, have kind of been surprises at the combine, and I'm really curious to see what Kevin Austin's going to be able to do.
Yeah, because I think his stock needs to go up. I mean,
it's dependent on the
100%. I mean, he's banking on a good combine, a good pro day to really raise his stock because it's not very high right now, and it wasn't. I mean, look, you and I both said he needed to come back to raise his stock, and so he's betting on the combine and the pro day to raise his stock. So he really needs a good pro day. So we'll and combine for that matter. So we'll see. I'm actually looking forward to hearing you guys talk about that kind of stuff.
Me too.
I think it's very, very interesting to see where these guys fall. And then who also didn't get an invite too.
Right. Which doesn't mean they're not going to get drafted or
not at all.
They'll get their pro day opportunity. But look, my understanding is the combine choices come from, suggestions from the league, the teams around the league. So the fact that I think it's 334, Kurt Hiestand wasn't part of it was a little surprising to me, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, that's the one
really
that
was.
I think surprises me the most. I think maybe it has to do a little bit with his size. Maybe that's part of it.
And his position.
Yeah. But again, he'll have an opportunity at the Notre Dame Pro Day for sure. And the last, 5 to 10 pro days, pretty much every NFL team has been represented. So, I mean, he'll have his opportunity for sure. It just won't be on the
it'll depend, too, on does Kyle Hamilton work out of the pro day?
That's a good point.
If Kyle Hamilton's going to work out of the pro day, that's going to help Kurt Hiestand and Kyron Williams and Kevin Austin and Drew White and all those guys. If he doesn't work out at the pro day, because there just aren't a lot of, other – Kyron could be the interesting one. But there's a lot of teams not in need of a running back that aren't going to necessarily, really be there. Because if you look at the last few drafts, there's been, high-level guys at the pro days. Jeremiah Wusu-Koromoa, Liam Eichenberg, Robert Hainsey last year. The year before that, I mean, you had Chase Claypool and, Cole Kmet, that were going to do some different things. You had, there's been guys each year. 2019, when it was Julian Love, Dexter Williams, when
it was, McGlinchey and Nelson, that was like the best pro day ever. Like watching those guys battle with each other. Like that was so much fun.
And you had so many NFL teams. I mean, that was to me by far the most NFL teams we've seen.
That was fun. Like that. Yeah. Pro days are boring, frankly. Yeah. And that one had some juice to it. I'll just say that. Like I enjoyed that one. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that one was a lot of fun.
All right, so we got some more stuff we want to talk about today, Vince, and we're gonna talk about tight ends for a little bit, and then we're gonna spend some time talking about the importance of the relationship between Harry Hiestand and Blake Fisher. And this is not a concern thing, just more of an analysis thing as we prep for this thing to really take off, right? So that's really where it comes from. But Vince, I want to start with tight ends, obviously, and we talked a lot the other day about George Takacs leaving. I know that you weren't part of the show, like visually, but have you recovered? Have you gotten through your mourning period with George Takacs being gone? I know that's your boy. Him and Cam Hart, those are your boys.
Those are my guys. And I tell you what, and we talked about this when he announced originally that he was going to stick around, right? I love the guy. And one of the things that if he ever asked my opinion, which he never would, but if he ever asked my opinion, if he came to one of the unsanctioned, George Takacs fan club meetings and he asked me, I would tell him, look, you need to go. You know what I mean? Like if you want
this one of those, if you love something enough, you let it go.
Right. That's exactly right. It's not you, it's me. No. I would have told him, like, look, if you want to play in the NFL, which I assume that he does, your best option is to go play somebody. Go be the number
because
one
he's
tight
gotten
end.
the benefits of being at tight end for 4 years, or whatever the
Absolutely.
case may be, right?
No
Like now it's about getting production.
And he's got his degree.
Yeah.
He's got all of that done, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is a case where, as a graduate transfer, I mean, obviously everybody can play right away, but as a graduate transfer, you go to what is going to help you to the next level.
But why that matters, though, Vince, is because graduate transfers don't really have to do anything with classes.
That's very
true.
true.
Some of the guys that are coming back this year have said that. Like, look, I'm not grinding all semester to get my master's, right? Like
they're just taking enough classes to be considered
because a lot of these guys have already graduated in 3.5 years, so they've already taken a bunch of their master's classes. So like they're kind of in their last little portion. So they're like, look, I'm focused. Like Bo Bauer mentioned this recently. Like, hey, look, I'm looking to get a chance to just play football, right? And just focus on football. And that's the thing with George is, you're wherever you're going there for 2 semesters.
Yep.
Right. And yeah, if you can get a master's, that's great. But this is your audition for the NFL.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And he's going to get an opportunity wherever he goes, whether that's LSU or I think you guys talked about Boston College. I've seen other things out there, but he's going to get
an College one makes a lot of sense to me.
Kind of does.
Not just because of McNulty. I mean, forget the McNulty aspect of it. That's obviously a position coach he's had for a couple of years. I don't even think that's the biggest attraction to me. I think that's the quarterback he came in with, right? Yep. That's the guy he spent 2 years with on the scout team.
Absolutely.
Connecting with and all that. And he knows what Phil can do. And Phil's a guy that's proven the last 2 years he loves throwing to tight ends.
Right.
Yep. When he's been healthy the last 2 years, he loves throwing to tight ends. So, I mean, goodness, that makes a ton of sense. I mean,
absolutely.
Where's the one place you could go where he knows what he's getting at quarterback?
Yep. And it's it's a similar atmosphere to Notre Dame as well. I mean, if he really enjoyed Notre Dame as Notre Dame, right, going to Boston College it's very similar. I mean, let's be honest. So there's a lot of bonuses, a lot of pluses to go to Boston College, and I would have no problem if he did that. And frankly, I'm happy for George. I think this is a great decision. I think he made a hasty decision to begin with, and I was confused by it. I was excited because I like the guy, like having him on the team that I root for and a cover. But at the same time, I think this is the best decision for George Takacs to move his game to the next level and to get people to think of him more than what he is right now. Like, we see what he can do, but it's such small little snippets, and it's very obvious that he probably was going to be in the exact same role moving forward. So I'm really happy for him. I think he made the right choice, and I'm going to continue to follow his career and see where he's at. You know what I mean? How he's doing. And all of that, I will always be a George Takacs fan. I'll always be rooting for him to be successful, even if he goes to LSU.
Yeah, which I would love it if he's not.
I would too. Yeah. I believe I am firmly in the Boston College, side of things. I think that's a great fit. Just like, I mean, you just outlined it. But I want whatever he thinks is best for himself and whatever he thinks is going to get him to where he wants to be. And that's the most important thing. So I'm super excited for him and what is in his future.
I felt like, we weren't going to talk about Takacs today, but I was like, how can I not let Vince?
I appreciate that. I was chomping at the bit, sitting in the background, listening to you guys talk, and I was upset, but really happy.
I got to let the president of the George Takacs fan club have some public words.
Self-proclaimed.
So Notre Dame will have 6 tight ends on the roster next year, which is still a lot, but a much healthier number when you consider. Normally, I would say 5 is the ideal number. But because 4 of them are going to be either true freshmen or sophomores / redshirt freshmen, and 2 guys are coming back from ACL injuries, I like the 6 for this class, especially since one of them is gone after this season. I mean, look, let's be real. Barring a catastrophe, no one should hope that Michael Mayer's on the team in 2023. No one.
Absolutely.
Because if Michael Mayer's on the team in 2023, something really bad happened to him or the team in 2022.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that would be bad. That would be he has some devastating injury that, his draft stock plummets and he's got to come back and prove himself. I do not want Michael Mayer on the team in 2023, right? Because that, again, there's no good scenario, in my opinion, that causes him to come back in 2023. And you say, he get a chance to compete for championships. Look, when it comes to that decision, your priority needs to be what's best for you. And he's
right.
And then if he comes back for 2023, then he's got to possibly compete with like Brock Bowers and some other tight ends for the higher draft. I think next year is the year that makes sense for him. So it's also good to have the additional tight ends because everybody behind him is going to have eligibility beyond 2022. So
Right.
the injuries plus Mayer being gone, I think 6 is a much healthier number for Notre Dame. They are now at 85 scholarships of based on what we know publicly.
They've got room.
They're going to need to, lose a couple more guys. I think they will lose a couple more guys post spring, most likely. And there's always some kid that does something dumb and gets kicked out, right? And that'll probably happen.
That will probably happen. Yeah.
And
we're talking about kids here.
I got one guy in mind, but we'll see how that pans out.
I know you do.
But, so if they want to add transfers, there needs to be another guy or something like that. So, when we get to the spring, you're not going to see the full group of tight ends there, right? You're not going to see Kane Barong, who's going to be a guy that is probably still coming back from his knee injury. Obviously, we won't see Eli Raridan because he's not an early enrollee.
And he's too, but he tore his knee up, right?
Right. And so, you look at it, Vince, and it's a situation where this is Takacs being gone presents a really unique scenario for the rest of the tight ends and the tight ends coach, because you have a new tight ends coach now. He's got to learn the personnel. If I'm him, I'm kind of like, okay, I'd like to have my full allotment this spring, but with a couple guys out, I got to focus on these two, and then I can focus more on this guy during the summer, whatever the case may be.
Right.
But when you look at the tight ends coach, we believe it's going to be Jared Parker. It hasn't obviously been officially made known, but every expectation that we have is it's going to be him. It's no different than the Hiestand and all these other things where it's like, what are we waiting on? Like, just it's Notre Dame being Notre Dame, right? Like, I don't see any issues, but you're going into a situation, Vince, where you're not going to have your full allotment of guys.
You're going to have what, 3 healthy scholarship tight ends? Does that sound right?
3, yeah. Mayer, Bauman, and Mitchell Evans.
Right.
Because Holden Stace isn't an early enrollee either.
Right.
So you're not going to have the 2 freshmen. Kane Barong's going to probably be moving around, but he's not going to be
all in.
Practice.
Like it won't be a full go situation. You might see him doing some drill work or things like that, but you're not going to see him in full contact, I wouldn't imagine.
Right.
I mean, I would be shocked if that was the case.
So, Kevin Bauman's been a bit of a tough luck kid the last couple of years. Injuries, being behind Michael Mayer, his freshman year, he's got Mayer, Tremble, Brock Wright, Takacs all ahead of him.
Right.
I'll bet you $20 at all 4 of them. All 4 of those guys are going to be on an NFL roster in 2023.
I think that's a safe bet. Yep.
And then in 2024, in 2023, all 5 of the guys ahead of him will be on NFL. No. In 2024, Takacs and Mayer both out this year. So in 2023, all 5 of the guys that were above him his first year at Notre Dame are going to be on an NFL roster because Mayer, I keep forgetting about Mayer, and like when he's going to come out. So he would start in 2023.
Yes.
So there's not a lot of places you can go where literally every single dude ahead of you when you arrived is
going to be in the NFL.
In the NFL, right?
That's crazy.
Which is kind of nuts. And so
that tells you where Notre Dame. There's been that debate about who's tight end you.
Right.
I don't think it's a debate, but
it's to me Iowa. If we're talking recent history, I mean Iowa had 2 first-round picks on the same team.
True.
Right. I mean recently, and they've had George Kittle. I mean Iowa can absolutely lay claim to it. People talking about Miami being tight end you. If we're talking about the last 30 years, maybe last 40 years, maybe. But even then, if you really want to go back that far, don't talk to me about tight ends because I can start pointing to you about the early 1990s at Notre Dame when, Oscar McBride, who played several years in the NFL, was like Notre Dame's 4th tight end, right? Irv Smith was number 3 at one point in time, right? 1st-round draft pick. So, in recent last 10 years, Iowa's the only team that to me that can compete. And I think the advantage that Iowa has is some of their tight ends have gone on to be better in the pros than Notre Dame's guys because of injuries. I still believe Tyler Eifert had like 1 healthy year in the NFL and he caught 10+ touchdowns, was in the Pro Bowl, right? I mean, that's it. I mean, injuries really kept him, but Kyle Rudolph had a good career, but Iowa's had some really, really good tight ends in recent years. But point being,
right.
That's kind of what happens when you're at a place that's recruited tight end as well as Notre Dame has the last 5-6 years. And you look at Bauman, it's like he's kind of walking into a perfect opportunity because two things. Number one, with the lower numbers, you're not going to want to go out and you're not going to want to wear out Michael Mayer in the spring.
Completely agree.
Right?
He's going to get reps.
That's where Notre Dame's in a really interesting situation this spring.
Yeah.
They're going to be very low on numbers at receiver and very low at numbers at tight end.
Right.
So you're going to see walk-ons getting reps.
Yeah.
Right. Notre Dame's got multiple tight ends walk-ons, multiple receiver walk-ons. I mean,
Right.
you're going to see, like at receiver, you're going to see Connor Radigan get a chance to play this spring. I mean, he's going to get reps, right? And Vince, you've told me this. Connor Radigan was a really good high school football player, correct?
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
He's a kid that if you and I were coaching at, University of Indianapolis or Butler or something like that, we're recruiting the heck out of that kid.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I think he wants to be a doctor like his dad.
Right.
Like,
If I was able to recruit him to a D3 school, he'd have been a star. I mean, it's a good football player, right? He's not necessarily a guy that's going to go out and go ahead.
I was going to say it's funny because we talked to his dad a lot on another show that I do for pregame, and one of the shows he's like, yeah, Connor's really hot because he's not getting enough playing time. Like he has drive and he wants to play.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
he didn't just come here to go to school, right?
Exactly.
And so he's going to get that chance in the spring. Matt Salerno is going to get that chance. It's not ideal for the entire team building, but there's going to be some guys that get the chance. Then when you look at tight end, it's going to be a similar thing. But the one guy to me that's going to get the biggest advantage from this spring is Kevin Bauman. And so you look at the opportunities that are presented at tight end, but there's also some challenges at tight end, right?
Sure.
And so Kevin Bauman walks into the situation of, hey, what's your role going to be at tight end? Like you're in competition for that number 2 spot now, behind Michael Mayer.
Absolutely.
It's an open battle now.
Absolutely.
Like it went from you're going to have to beat out George, which wouldn't be easy, to it's an open spot.
I think it's wide open.
The number 2 tight end at Notre Dame is basically a starting. You're going to get starting caliber snaps.
Yes.
I mean, George Takacs had over 400 snaps last year.
Right.
I mean, you're going to play a lot of football. Now, you may not get the ball a ton.
Which is why George is leaving. I mean,
right. Yes. Right. Agree. If Notre Dame's number 2 tight end was catching as many passes as Iowa's number 2 tight end did in 2018, right, when they had 2 guys go in the top 10, there'd be a little bit of a different story, right? But that's just the reality of it. It's not a complaint, or we're just stating facts here,
what
right?
It is. Yes.
And then you look at the year before, Michael Mayer played 564 snaps, Tommy Tremble played 472, and Brock Wright played 345 in only 12 games.
Right.
You same. It's the same story in 2019, right? I mean, Cole Kmet played over 700 snaps, Tommy Tremble played over 300 snaps, and Brock Wright played 148 snaps, and he missed 2 games, right? And George Takacs played 50 snaps. So if you're the number 2, number 3 tight end, you're going to get a lot of playing time, especially the number 2 tight end.
Right.
Well, now Kevin Bauman gets a chance to step into that role this spring and battle Mitchell Evans, right? So for Kevin Bauman, he seems to finally be healthy. He's been banged up a lot. He's got to stay healthy. He cannot afford to miss time this spring. So he's got to come out and number 1, prove that he can block. That's going to be the biggest thing about this battle is if Kevin Bauman's a pass catcher first and a blocker second, he's not going to play a ton.
Right.
Because Mitchell Evans is being groomed to be a blocker. Now, Mitchell was not a great blocker as a freshman, but he tried hard.
He wasn't, and they, in my opinion, and you and I have talked about this during the season, I feel like they put him in position almost to fail, and I don't mean that in a negative way.
They were sort of forced to,
right? He just wasn't.
I would say they put him in position to fail. They put him in a really tough spot.
Yeah, he just wasn't.
Where you had to man up.
Right.
I mean, and the thing about Mitchell is, let's keep in mind, and this is partly why they started putting Joe Alt at tight end. Let's be honest. I mean,
good point.
Mitchell may not play as much down the stretch if there's not the injuries at tackle. If Blake Fisher doesn't get hurt, we may not have seen a lot of Mitchell Evans. Because we just still seen Joe Alt being that blocking tight end.
Because they knew they had to get Joe Alt on the field, and they were trying to figure out a creative way to do it.
And it's not like you're running that guy on a pass route. The number 3 tight end is not on a pass route.
Exactly.
So there's no need to get too cute with it. So Mitchell Evans steps into the fold, and I think it's one of those things where he got his butt whooped a little bit this year, but it's going to benefit him.
Exactly.
Because
it's like a short-term loss for a long-term gain,
right,
is the way we look at it.
Because the kid was a flipping quarterback as a senior in high school. Now, he played some receiver and tight end as a junior, but he was a pass-catching guy, and there aren't a lot of quarterbacks that can come in as freshmen and move to tight end and be used as blockers. So he battled. It's just now it's like this offseason for him is about weight room. But for Kevin Bauman, you've got to establish yourself as a top blocker. If he can somehow sort of say, hey, I can, because of my body, my stature, Kevin's not like a 6'5", long, tall,
Right.
long torsoed guy. He's 6'3.5", 6'4", right?
Yeah, they got him listed at 6'4.5" on the spring
Yeah,
roster.
no, he doesn't look 6'4.5" to me.
Completely agree. They have him listed at the exact same height as Michael Mayer,
and he doesn't,
and 9 pounds lighter.
He does not look like Michael Mayer.
I agree.
The point being, his build allows him to sort of do some of the leverage blocks, the lead blocks, the kick out blocks that Tommy Tremble did a lot of in 2019 or 2020. And so can he fill that role, or can he be the traditional number 2 tight end that can line up attached and block a 9 technique or block down as part of kickouts that can work to the second level as part of his own combination? Like, the fact is it'd be nice to see him out there catching the ball, but the reality is that's not what's getting you the number 2 tight end job. What's going to get you the number 2 tight end job is, can you go block, right? And that's the reality. Now, we could sit here all day and argue about whether or not that should be the primary role, but that's a different conversation.
That's a different show.
Day.
That's a different
We're looking
show.
at what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And what it is, or what it has been anyway. At least, this is what it has been. It's been you're going to block and maybe get targeted 4 or 5 times in a year.
And right? Again, I think the empirical evidence that we have, not only is what we've seen on the field, but the fact, and I know I kind of said this before, but the fact that George Takacs is leaving tells me that that's not changing anytime soon. You stated in the last show that they tried to get him to stick around. If they wanted, and if part of their pitch to get him to stick around was, look, the number 2 tight end is you're going to get targeted, you're going to get this, you're going to get
which
that.
They told him.
And
right,
he sees the writing on the wall. Like, clearly that's not going to happen. So we're going to operate on the premise that second tight end, the way to get on the field as the second tight end is to be a blocker. And that's just the reality that we live in right now.
Right. And they can tell them all they want that that's not going to be the case, but we all know it's going to be the case. I mean, Tommy Tremble in 2020, a guy that was a 3rd round draft pick, got targeted 28 times the entire year. That's it.
Right.
That's it. And if you think about it, a lot of those targets came in the first 3 games before they kind of fully handed the thing off to Michael Mayer. Because he was targeted 13 times in the first 3 games.
Right.
Which means he was targeted 15 times, only 15 times the next, 9 games, right? So the proof is in the pudding. You can, and we've talked about this in recruiting. You can tell me all you want what you're going to do. What I can really evaluate you on is what you have done.
Exactly.
And I think that was the concern for George. And that's the thing. It's like, so you got to prove yourself as a blocker. Now, if you can prove yourself as a blocker and secure that role, then go start making some plays and practice in the pass game. That's how you convince them to open things up.
Right.
Right. That's the reality. So you got to do the blocking thing first, then you go out there and start making plays. And I think that the thing that makes this interesting is when I look at Kevin Bauman, here's the concern I have about him as the number 2 guy. Meaning number 2 is in he gets the kind of reps that George Takacs had. His game is very similar to Michael Mayer's. Like, what he does well is similar to Michael Mayer's. He's not on the level that Michael Mayer is. I'm talking about like how you use, better way to say it as opposed to his game is like how he is used within the offense is very similar to how you would use Michael Mayer. I think that's a better way of saying it, so people don't. You're saying that Kevin Bauman's as good as Michael Mayer? No, I'm not saying that. So when I look at that, I say, okay, that to me, even that makes it a little bit concerning to me as far as having the pass game expanded. So then you get into, okay, well, if he's the number 2 tight end, then is there a number 3 that emerges that's got the unique skill set? Maybe. But that would be Kane Barong or Holden Stace or Eli Raridan, and those guys aren't going to be available till summer into fall.
Right.
Kane because he's injured, and then the other 2 because they're either in high school or in Eli Raridan's case, both. He's in high school and he's got
injured. Yeah.
So this is a tremendous opportunity for Kevin Bauman. And then if you're Mitchell Evans, the interesting thing about him is they actually like what he brings to the table in the pass game.
Right.
Because he's more of a vertical guy. He's like 6'7". He can run. He brings a little bit of a different – he is more like Takacs because Takacs brought a different element than Mayer. Takacs is 6'6" and he can run.
Yes.
And that's where we're like, hey, get him on the seams. And whenever they did throw him the ball, like in spring game and different things like that on deep drags and seam routes, I mean, George was able to get open. And we saw him get open a ton in practices before things got shut down in 2020. Consistently catching the football was an issue for George at times. But the dude could run. He could get open. And I think that's what they see in Mitchell Evans as well.
Right.
Is a big athletic kid that could – because, see, that's the thing is I think there's a misnomer about Mitchell Evans that and this was kind of to your point earlier, Vince, is Mitchell Evans was used as a blocking tight end, and we see his size, 6'6", bigger kid. There's been people talking about how he may eventually move to offensive line. I never understood that. Like he's going to go from quarterback to left tackle. I don't see that happening anytime soon. What the staff liked about him is he was athletic.
Exactly.
I mean, he could move. And so you used him as a freshman for things that you didn't necessarily recruit him to do.
Right.
So that kind of, to me, was a benefit to Mitchell and puts him in a position where if he can go out and make some of those vertical plays that I think they recruited him to do, that's where he's got a tremendous opportunity to battle Kevin Bauman for that role this spring.
I think there also is a possibility with everything that you just said, and I'm thinking about it in my head about, okay, if I'm in Tommy Rees's shoes, or how would I go about using the personnel that I have available to me, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that there is a way, and a very easy way, in my opinion, to use both of those guys as your number two, mm-hmm. right? I mean, you don't have to we got to get 400 reps to one guy. You know what I mean? Like they have distinctly different strengths and attributes about them. You could use both.
You're talking about
them.
the 2 and the 3, right?
Right.
Yeah. And the same is true when you add Kane Barong to the conversation.
Absolutely.
Who has even a more distinctly different game than those.
Absolutely. I think they can be more creative with the use of their tight ends. Look, and everybody's harping on the 12 personnel and the 13 personnel. Again, it's not the personnel, it's what you do with that personnel. Right. And I think you can be very creative with this tight end room. You don't have to give all 400 snaps to one guy. You don't have to marry yourself to that. Like, I don't think that's the way it needs to be. I think you've got options here. And I think that's the exciting part.
And I think there's a misnomer about, I think Notre Dame's problem is not 12 personnel, it's how they use 12 personnel.
Right.
And I've pointed this example. If you go back and watch the SEC title game between Alabama and Florida in 2020, if you go back and watch the Notre Dame Alabama game, and I understand if you don't want to, that's why I'm trying to tell you to go watch the SEC title game. Alabama ran a lot of 12 personnel in 2020, a lot of 12 personnel. The difference is they would throw out of it a lot more. Again, I haven't done an empirical study on this. It was more of an impression while watching the team play that they would throw more. Now, they didn't throw to their number 2 tight end a ton. They would have him pass block and have the other guy, run routes and things like that. But, they did a lot of 12 personnel. And I mean, they came out against Florida in that SEC title game. And I mean, Mike Miller Forrestall was their number 1 tight end that year. He played 628 snaps in 12 games. Jaleel Billingsley played over 300. That's a lot of 12 personnel, right? And then Major Tennyson and Cameron Luatow combined for 129 snaps as well, as sort of in that third tight end role. And so they use a lot of 12 personnel. They just use it where they use sort of the run tendencies to their advantage. I mean, this year, right. Alabama, Cameron Latou had 672 snaps, and Jaleel Billingsley had 479 snaps, and Kendall Randolph, their number 3 tight end, had 228 snaps. Those are Notre Dame type of numbers when it comes to 12 and 13 personnel. So this notion that, top teams don't do that. Yeah, they do. The difference is they use it differently. And that's where and that's one of those things where this is 100% opinion. It's just a gut feeling that this offense is going to look a lot different with Tommy Rees running the offense. Tommy Rees running the offense. And the reason I say that is because even in the bowl game, we're still seeing like the establish what we've seen. The other thing too is, and I've talked to a few people about this, Vince, you and I saw this in practice. George is really athletic, but consistently catching the football was not always a strength of his.
He
Part of
would
me
make some
wonders,
highlight catches.
and Tommy Tremble
Yeah.
had the same problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of me wonders, like, did they not throw to the number 2 tight end as much under Tommy because they didn't trust in the catching ability, or is that just who they wanted to be?
Right.
I just have a feeling that we're going to see the number 2 tight ends be used a little bit more in the pass game this year.
I hope so.
And I think more importantly, we're going to see the pass game used out of 12 personnel more this year. And so it doesn't always have to be. So, like, I wrote an article the other day at Irish Breakdown, Vince, and it was about, the need, and I looked at the data. I mean, the opinion that you and I had, the impression that we had watching games, statistically is proven to be true, which is Michael Mayer does not get targeted on balls beyond 10 yards nearly as much as other top tight ends. The data proved it to be true. It's not even close to what other top tight ends are. So, if you're going to do 12 personnel and you expand your play, which I think Tom Reese is going to, the part of the game I think is going to see a big jump this year, especially if Harry Hiestand has the impact we think he's going to have. I think the play action game is going to take off for Notre Dame. It's going to be a much bigger part of the offense. You couldn't really use play action as much this year because nobody was afraid of you running the football.
Exactly.
No good teams were.
Exactly.
So you can play action all you want. We know you're throwing the ball.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't run on us.
Right.
And so I think we're going to see that expand, but that's where 12 personnel can be effective because you're running 2 receivers out, and then, you run Michael Mayer on some deeper routes, and then you've got your second tight end and pass pro.
Right.
So even if you're just using the pass game more out of 12, it can help you, even if maybe you're not doing it as much with the second tight end. But then also you can use Mayer as a decoy. You can have situations where you're gonna max pro with Mayer staying in a couple times a game, not often, just because if they see Mayer blocking,
they're thinking run.
Right? Oh, they're definitely, the safeties are coming downhill 100 miles an hour.
And you run somebody right up the seam, baby.
There you go.
Yeah.
Or, and you got to post, you got to deep drag with the other tight end and a post behind it. And, that's where you get some big plays. Bama did that stuff all the time. They were great with that. They would play action right at their tight end. That field safety would come flying down, and they'd bring Devontae Smith on a climb route right behind it. Bam, big play. And you're like, how the heck did Devontae Smith get that wide open? Great play design.
Exactly.
That's what it was.
They schemed to get their guys open. I mean, that's –
And we saw a lot more of that down the stretch from Tommy Reese.
I agree.
And that's why I feel like now that he gets a whole offseason where he doesn't have BK looking over his shoulder,
which we know
and saying,
happened.
We're going to do this, we're going to do that, I think we're going to see that part of the game expanded. So maybe Notre Dame doesn't throw more drop back passes next year. If the RPO and the play action game get it nuanced, that to me is really the first 2 areas that I want to see the offense change next year. If they still only throw maybe 15 drop backs a game, I'm cool with that. Because 15
absolutely.
drop backs, you're going to have 5 to 8 RPOs, 6 to 7 play actions, and all of a sudden you're at 30 attempts.
Right.
And you don't want to really get past.
And if you're throwing more than
30 attempts,
if you're throwing more than that with the offense that we believe that they're going to be employing, it's not going well. Like the game, I don't think is going the way
it means it's inefficient, right? And that's the problem. Is you really don't want to be in a situation where you're throwing more than 30 times a whole lot. I mean, you look at Bryce Young last year. And that was a much more pass-heavy offense than what I think Notre Dame should be. Here's his attempts through the season: 38, 27, 35, 22, 26, 48, 28, 43, 37, 23, 40, 51, 44, 28, 57. And the 57 was in the title game, which they lost.
Right.
51 was in the Auburn game, which was multiple overtimes, and they didn't play well. 40 was in the Arkansas game where they almost lost. I mean, 48 was in the Texas A&M game that they lost.
Right.
When the offense was rolling,
exactly the point.
They were throwing fewer. They were throwing the ball less. When they blew out Ole Miss, he went 20 of 26. Right. When they blew out Mississippi State, 20 of 28. Right. LSU, the offense struggled. It was inefficient. He went 24 of 37. Right. I mean, that's where we talk about where you want to see. You don't want to be more than 28 to 25 to 30, 32 attempts in a game. You want to be higher efficiency, meaning higher completion percentage.
Right.
And where does that come from? RPO, screen game, play action. Those are all much more high percentage throws than just drop back out of empty personnel. That stuff's a part of it too, right? You need to have those things. But being a pro-style spread offense means being a team that's going to still run the football and outside zone it and RPO it and play action it, and that's where I think Tommy Rees wants to be. But you couldn't really be a great play action team when nobody was afraid of your run game. Nobody good anyway was afraid of your run game.
Everything that you just said over the last 30 seconds, you need a run game.
Right.
Because you need to be balanced.
Right.
And again, we're not going to go into what balance means.
Because we'll get into that. We'll get into that this summer.
But you need to have the threat of a run game. Otherwise, all the rest of that stuff doesn't even matter. And that's why our next conversation.
That's where the tight end situation comes into play, though. If you have legitimate pass catching threats at tight end behind Michael Mayer, it gives Tommy Rees a lot of weapons.
Yes.
I just feel that we're going to see more of that in this season, especially if a couple players step up. One guy to me that's going to really be intriguing that we haven't talked about yet a lot is Kane Barong, because he is the unicorn at the tight end position among the returners, meaning he can line up and late in the year before his knee injury, he was starting to get a lot more practice reps with the ones as playing in that slot, playing in that wing, playing in that Tommy Tremble role. And then he hurt his knee. He was about to start getting some playing time, and then he hurt his knee.
Yeah.
If he and talking to people close to the situation, his rehab's gone great. He is ahead of schedule, which means he'll be back 100% by the summer. So I don't think we'll see much of him other than maybe going through some drills, maybe some running in the spring. He won't be in any contact.
Right.
And that's why look, if Kevin Bauman and Mitchell Evans don't establish themselves in the spring, it's going to be really hard to hold off Kane Barong and the two younger tight ends, because that is a really talented group of three young guys. I think, Kevin Bauman is just a big offseason for him. If he doesn't make his move now, it's never going to happen for him.
I agree. Because he'll get buried again.
He'll get buried quickly.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say, you talk about the opportunities. This could not have been a better opportunity for Kevin Bauman. Takacs is gone. Barong's, please don't take this. He's not happy that Kane Barong is hurt. I guarantee you. That's not what I'm saying. It's just about the circumstances set up perfectly.
You have an opportunity. Him. It gives you an opportunity.
Yes. Kane Barong is injured. He's out in the spring. Right. The two freshmen aren't on campus. Takacs is gone. Everybody already knows what Mayer can do. You're probably going to want to limit some of the workload on Mayer, which means great opportunity for you to get those reps. And you and Mitchell Evans both have golden opportunities to go out there this spring and establish yourselves as the number 2 or number 3 tight end before those other guys get in the mix. And I would not want to be the loser of that battle going into the summer. I wouldn't, because now that number 3 guy has to contend with Kane Barong getting back and breathing down his neck, Holden Stace and Eli Raridan showing up and wanting to be ready to go. And I think Eli Raridan probably won't be 100% by the time the season starts, but he's not going to be out all year. He hurt himself in December. I mean, it's like an 8-9 month process, right, Vince? It's still where you're back on the field and at least, no more than 8-9 months now with an ACL.
Yeah. But then and people were talking about, he'll be back, Eli Raridan's going to be back in time for the season. Well, that may be, but he still needs to get back into football shape. And he's going to
need the reps to learn the offense.
Yeah.
Part of the 8-9 months to me is getting back to 100% health.
Okay.
But as you and I have talked about, being back to 100% health doesn't mean you're back to 100% playing football shape, to your point.
Especially when you're a brand new player at a brand new place.
And you've got the mental part. Yeah, exactly.
Sure. And look, he's going to have plenty of opportunity to dive into the playbook and do all of those things. But, application on the field is a whole other conversation.
The point is, it's going to take him a little bit of time during the season.
Right.
If we see him against Ohio State and those, Marshall and Cincinnati and Cal, it means A, his rehab was ahead of schedule, and B, he's even better than we think, because he's forced himself on the field that quickly.
Right. Exactly.
I think it's going to be tough for him to do that. Number one, because he's coming back from an injury. Number two, because the dudes that are there. That's the other thing. And so I think a guy that is going to make a charge in the fall, and we'll get more into this as we get summer, but Kane Barong. So the point being, you're going to have Kane who's hungry to get on the field, and he's going to be pushing in the fall. That means you've got to really establish yourself now if you're Kevin Bauman. And look, Kevin Bauman was, I believe, a consensus 4-star recruit, and some people had him in the top 250. I think he was an Army All-American, right?
Yeah,
this is a good football player, right? He's been buried. People say, well, how does Brock Wright go to the NFL and do more than he did in college? I'm like, because he was sitting behind a bunch of other NFL dudes at Notre Dame. It's not like he was sitting behind a couple walk-ons and they just didn't like him.
Right.
He was sitting behind a 3rd-round draft pick, a 2nd-round draft pick in Cole Kmet. Alizé Mack was a 7th-round pick, but we all know Alizé Mack had better than 7th-round talent. He just had undrafted free agent not making a roster head, an attitude. But the talent-wise was day 2, in my opinion.
Right.
If not, if not.
Completely agree. Yeah,
right.
No question. Yeah.
So that was the whole thing about Brock Wright and the fact that he was just buried behind really good players. And the same thing is true of Kevin Bauman. So him not playing doesn't mean he can't play. He's been banged up a lot, and he's been buried behind really good players.
Right. So it's a great opportunity.
You're not buried this spring, man.
Great opportunity in the spring. He's going to get every opportunity in the world with only 3 tight ends. And like you said, Michael Mayer, you don't want to give him a ton of reps. I mean,
he's going to get a normal workload.
Yes.
You don't want to overdo it.
You don't want to overdo it because of your lack of depth. So you're going to see, for example, Charlie Selna, right? He's a walk-on junior from California, right? He's 6'6" and an eighth, 250 pounds. He's going to get a little bit of playing time, right? I mean, if they go with 12 personnel, he's automatically on the second team. You know what I mean? So there's going to be some guys that are going to get some opportunities, and obviously Kevin Bauman is one of those guys.
Right. So we'll definitely see how that plays out. It's going to be intriguing to see, but Mitchell Evans to me is the guy that I'm really curious to see, because I have no clue what kind of growth he's going to make it from year 1 to year 2, because he's such an anomaly in that he really wasn't a tight end. He was a quarterback. He got playing time that we didn't expect him to get this year out of necessity.
Right.
His compete level was the thing that surprised me, to be honest with you. That was the thing I was most concerned about for a kid that played quarterback. Is this kid's not going to want to go out there and block, right? Like that's. I mean, look, I played quarterback. I can assure you, if they would have been like, "Hey, we want you to go block on this play," I'm like, no.
You just want me to get in the way, like
a cut block, like on a reverse, like that. No, we want you to line up at tight end and go block a 9 technique. Yeah, see, the thing is about that, coach. It's not happening, right? But for Mitchell, I mean, that's we're kind of being funny. He signed up to play tight end. He knew he was going to have to block.
Of course,
kind of being sarcastic. The point is, you don't do a lot of that when you're playing quarterback, And his willingness, again, he was not strong enough. He didn't have the technique necessary.
Right.
And the technique necessary isn't a coaching thing. I mean, John McNulty. Kudos to John McNulty for even getting that kid to be able to be a competent player.
Even look like a tight end on the field.
Yeah, he was a quarterback.
Right.
But he didn't have the strength. He didn't have the experience from a technical standpoint.
Right.
This isn't a kid who played a ton of high school football at tight end. That'd be a different story. But to see him go out there and just to compete the way he did was like, okay, this kid wants to be something.
Right.
This kid wants to be there. And he made some plays in the blue gold game last year. I mean, he had a really nice diving 4th down catch. Remember that? When Drew Kawine got pressured and he hit that little quick crosser and the tight end laid out for it. That was Mitchell Evans.
Yeah.
So the kids, look, I was like, when they signed, I was like, what are they doing? Where are they taking this kid? Right? Like, and we could still debate. There were some other tight ends in the class maybe they could have gone for, but I was like, what are they doing here? Like, why are you taking this kid? I'm going to be honest with you. Then you see his athleticism jump up a little bit as a senior, but you're still like, tight end you're taking that kid. Like, and Mitchell was like, okay, yeah, you keep talking, Driscoll. You keep running your mouth, right? I'm going to show you that I can play football. And that's what he did as a freshman.
Right.
And so I'm curious to see what he's going to do, right? Because isn't this the funny thing? Like, of all these highly ranked kids that Notre Dame has landed, the 3-star converted quarterback is the kid that could really step up and shine this spring behind Mayer.
I know, right?
I just think that's hilarious.
I think it's awesome. Awesome. It tells you about work ethic and everything else. Right. And I love it. And it
also tells you that you can find talented players of all shapes, sizes, and star rankings.
Yes, no question about it. And this is a big offseason for him in the weight room and everything else to start to fill out that body.
Right. That's going to be the key.
Because he's
6'5". The compete level and all that's fine and dandy.
Right.
But if you can't line up and block people, and that's the big key for Mitchell. I started to talk about that and then got distracted. You're absolutely right, Vince. Thanks for bringing me back to what we're talking about. If he can't prove himself to be a legitimate go get that job done as a blocker, he's not going to be able to play this year.
Exactly.
He had to play last year. He may play in like some 13 personnel and all that, but look, you've got Holden Stace showing up. If I'm going to err on the side of playing a guy who can't block, I'm going to play the more dynamic young freshman.
Sure.
Right? Mitchell's got to show that he can block. It's the same thing we talk about with Kevin Bauman. Blocking is going to get you on the field. Then your ability to catch the football will present opportunities, but they're not going to put you on the field as a number 2 tight end just because you can run routes and catch the ball.
Right.
Well, they may put you on, but that's all you're going to do, which means way fewer reps, right? So this is a big spring for both of them, and they're both going to get a ton of reps this spring.
Yep.
So
just like we talk about a wide receiver,
exactly.
Because of the depth chart, you're going to get a ton of reps. Period.
Yeah, exactly. So Vince, let's transition to our final point here. We got about 10 or 15 minutes to chat about this. And when I look at Coach Hiestand and his arrival at Notre Dame, and we think big picture what this means and how good this group could be, I get asked a lot, how good can this line be in year one? And I start thinking, dude, it's a great question.
Yeah.
And look, I think a big jump, right? To me, they should be a top 10 to 12 offensive line this year. They should absolutely be that. The question of whether they can be a top 3 to 4 unit is going to depend on several things.
Sure.
Number one is you got to improve the guard play. Guard play's got to get a lot better. I mean, I think Andrew Kristofic solidified it last year.
He wasn't a liability.
Right, but he wasn't a difference maker.
Correct.
Now he's got the experience. Now he gets to work with Coach Hiestand, who initially recruited him. Does his game take that next level?
Sure.
Can Josh Lugg stay healthy and play guard? I think if Josh Lugg can be healthy, he could really solidify the guard position. But he's going to have to battle, Rocco Spindler and hopefully Michael Carmody. I hope they move Michael Carmody into guard. That's where he belongs. You're going to have, once Billy Schrouth gets healthy, I mean, there's going to be some guys there. You got to solidify that. But at the end of the day, to be a great line, you need 2 things. Number one, you need a cohesive unit, right? You can have 5 good players that play great together, and you're going to have a great line. To have a championship line, you need at least 1 star. And to me, obviously, Jarrett Patterson has a chance to be that.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
But
that's why he came back. That's why he came back.
He has a chance to be that,
yes,
all-American first-round pick.
Right.
But there's a guy on the roster in Blake Fisher who has a chance to be a dominant force. And the pairing of him and Harry Hiestand is going to go one of 2 ways. And this isn't a knock on Blake or on Coach Hiestand. It's a statement of reality of any time you have a young star and then a new coach who didn't recruit him come on board, right? Because you came thinking one thing and you're getting another thing, right? And so to me, how well those 2 sort of pair together is going to ultimately be the difference between between this being a good offensive line and an elite offensive line. Because the thing for Coach Hiestand is, let's start with the coach first, right? I think it always starts with the coach, right? He has to understand, like, hey, look, I'm not changing my stripes. When we get on that football field, I'm still going to be me. But maybe there are some things you can do leading up to that help you prepare them better for that.
Sure.
We've talked, I mean, I would sit down and I would have a lot of hearts to heart with Blake and just let him know, like, man, I'm going to ride you harder than anyone we have. I would flat out tell him that. I'm going to demand more of you than anyone else on this team. I'm going to be harder on you. I'm going to cuss you more.
Yep.
I'm never going to accept what you're doing as good enough. And the reason I'm doing that, son, is because I think you have a chance to be an absolute star, one of the greatest that has ever come through this institution.
Right.
And that's saying a lot just looking at the last 10 years, much less the last 70 years, right? I mean, when you think about what Notre Dame's had in the last 10 years on the offensive line, Zach Martin, Chris Watt, Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, Liam Eichenberg, Robert Hainsey, Aaron Banks, Jarrett Patterson. Oh, and by the way, what's that one dude's name? Oh, gosh. Yeah, Quentin Nelson.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Sam Mustipher, Alex Bars. I mean, the linemen that have come through here have been pretty darn good players.
Yeah.
You got a chance to be as good as any of them. But I'm going to, like Q, it's like for him to do that with Q, that was fine. Q was a Jersey kid. If you've ever met his parents, you know that Q can take hard coaching.
Right.
And I mean that. I love his parents. They are awesome people. But like, you just meet them. They're no nonsense. It's like, hey man, go out there and get the work done. Right. I mean, you come home, complain about the coach. Hey, go figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, Q embraced that rough coaching. but he also signed up for it. He knew what he was
got
getting.
recruited by him. Yeah, exactly.
He got recruited by Harry Hiestand.
Right.
Blake didn't get recruited by Harry Hiestand. And so for Coach Hiestand, you got to let Blake know, hey, buddy, I'm not changing. And you shouldn't want me to change because how I do it.
Look at the track record.
Right.
Like, look at where we're at here.
But you got to prepare yourself. And you know, in the past, we've heard about how the veterans would let the younger players know, don't. I think Coach Hiestand needs to have that conversation with Blake. And Rocco. And Rocco's different, though, because, again, Rocco comes from an NFL background. His dad was an NFL player.
I'm not worried about him.
Comes from that. Like, they're more prepared for that mentality.
I would say that even this is – and I agree with you about the Hiestand part of it, like having that conversation. But I also feel like this is an area where Chris Watt can step in, too.
Yes.
Because he's been on the receiving end of Hiestand's coaching, right? And he's there as a resource.
Right. Yeah. And so when I look at guys like Blake Fisher and I look at guys like, I'm trying to think of some other guys that, you know, because Caleb Johnson, when I think of Michael Carmody, when I think of Tosh Baker, you know, a lot of these kids that were not recruited at all by Coach Hiestand. Those are the guys that I'm most concerned with because like Zeke Carell and Andrew Kristofic, they were initially recruited by Coach Hiestand. Which meant, and the reason I say that's important is because they know the reputation he had. They visited campus when he was still the coach. They heard the stories about how coach gets on you, right? And they still wanted to be at Notre Dame. So the reason I look at guys like, you know, Blake and Tosh and, you know, Carmody, I guess I don't just knowing his background. He's a coach's kid, right? So that's to say, like former players and coaches' kids, I usually don't get too worried about when it comes to hard coaching because they usually have gotten it already. It's the guys that haven't gotten that and that weren't recruited by him that I get a little concerned about. And the reason that we're focusing on Blake is because of how good he can be. Mm-hmm. If you're Blake, your then is to say, hey, look, I have to go into this. Blake needs to know exactly what he's walking into.
Right.
And it can't be like a culture shock where it's like, whoa, like he has to know before day one, dude, this is what you're talking to. So Chris Watt, like you said, Chris Watt needs to talk to him.
Yes.
And some of the former players, like I remember talking to former players last year that were getting ready for the draft, and they're like, this freshman kid, they didn't even know his name at the time because you know how linemen are. They don't care about the subject. They're like, hey, this freshman kid, number 54, this kid's one of the most talented players. These are guys that played with Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey, and you know, and like it's like one of the most talented players I've ever seen. And the thing about Blake that people don't, I think people see Blake and they see a kid who's kind of got some baby fat on him, and he just kind of got a different body type. And I think that people think about like, oh, is he going to take the hard coaching? I don't know if that's not really what we're saying here. I'm not worried about that. I mean, because the reason I say that is the one thing that people said about Blake the minute he showed up on campus, this kid works. Like that was the concern coming in. Is he going to work? Because you know that 340-pound kid that just kind of can bully people and doesn't really understand how you know those type of things. It's like, how's he going to work? Does he understand how? But then you hear about and he's like, this kid works as hard as anybody, and you're like, okay, cool, this kid gets it, right? So it's not that we're worried about. Is he gonna be mentally soft? It's not about him being soft. It's just that when you sign up for one thing,
exactly,
and something else is happening, it's like okay, this is a little
culture
different
shock
for me.
It's a flat out culture shock because Harry Hiestand coaches completely different than Jeff Quinn. They're not the same guy. They don't do it the same way, and that's it. That you know, a lot of these guys signed up for Jeff Quinn. And now they're getting Harry Hiestand. Right. It's you know, and you're what you're hoping for is that there's no buyer's remorse, right? I mean, you're hoping that okay, you roll with it. This is a new guy, and look, if they have NFL aspirations, it could happen every year. You might get a new coach. I mean, that's just the way it is. So, but they're still younger,
right? And the reason that this is important is because the longer it takes Blake and Coach Hiestand to kind of get on the same page, the longer it's going to take for this line to reach its potential. And that's always true of a star. I mean, it would have been true if Quentin Nelson didn't get along with Harry Hiestand.
Sure.
And that's the point that people make. Like somebody's asked this question, are we suspecting Blake as being soft or sensitive? No, that's not what we're talking about. At all. It's like, I'll give you an example. Okay. Like my wife tried super hard to be a great coach's wife. I mean, I'd have 15 kids over my house. I'm making $30,000 a year. That's it, right? She worked too. She would have to drive an hour and a half to Costco because we lived in freaking Defiance, Ohio, and the nearest Costco is an hour and a half away. She would do all this shopping, and she would make food on every Wednesday night for 15 kids, right? And she was, but it was harder on her because she didn't sign up for that. When she met me, I wasn't coaching. I wasn't getting into coaching. And so no matter how hard she tried and she loved me and it was still hard on her.
Right.
Because like I didn't sign up for this. She never complained about it. This was me reading my wife. And that was one of the reasons I got out of coaching, is because, that's not what my wife didn't sign up for me being gone for 2 months in a row, basically. Because when you're recruiting D3, you're home on the weekends. You have your staff meetings, and then Monday morning you're right back onto the road, and you're staying in hotels, and you're gone. I mean, for months at a time, because it's not like these little 2-week windows where you're flying around the country. D3, man, you're grinding from the end of the season till school starts. I mean, It's like you're on the road doing all that, and it's kind of like when you didn't sign up for something, it can be harder to adapt to it, and that's what we're referring to.
Exactly.
And that's that's kind of where we're out at this point in time. So that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about Blake being soft or not being coachable, because that's why we talked about how hard he was. A soft kid doesn't come in the day he shows up and work the way that Blake worked. A soft kid doesn't come in and have the success as a true freshman that Blake had up until the time he got injured. No one questioned Blake Fisher's work ethic. The question is that's what Blake signed up for. This isn't what he signed up for.
Right.
I think he's going to take it, because I think Blake is smart enough to realize however this guy coaches, it may not be my, cup of tea, but it works. And look what he's done. And I mean, I would argue that other than Quentin Nelson, I don't know if there's an offensive lineman that Notre Dame has had in the last 10 years that has Blake's God-given ability. Just pure God-given talent. Right. Other guys might have been more, Liam Eichenberg was more advanced technically coming out of high school, things like that. But, Blake has elite size, an elite size athleticism power combination.
Right.
He can move. He's got positional flexibility, and all those type of things are important. And so that's why this relationship is so important. It's because you can't get the most out of a kid if the kid doesn't embrace your coaching. Right. And that's the key. And that's why this is so important, because it's not about softness or anything like that. The other thing too is, if a kid trusts you, he will do anything you ask him to do. If that means right tackle, left guard, left tackle, whatever the case may be, he'll be more willing to do that. We're not saying we're going to move Blake Fisher. It's just the point of you never know what the future might hold.
Yeah, absolutely.
I doubt Quentin Nelson signed up at Notre Dame thinking I'm going to be a left guard the rest of my career, right? Well, it worked out for him because he trusted Coach Hiestand, right? And Aaron Banks, same thing. Aaron Banks came to Notre Dame to play tackle. Jarrett Patterson came to Notre Dame to play tackle, but he trusted Jeff Quinn. And when Jeff Quinn said, "Hey, we're going to move you to center," he trusted him and he made the move, right? I mean, that's what we're referring to. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And everybody's freaking out, obviously, about the whole, Fisher to guard and why
that's a conversation for a different day. That's not what we're talking about right now.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what
this is a bigger thing. So I think that is ultimately when people because I've had this question a lot. How good can this line be? How quickly can they adjust? It's going to depend on how quickly guys take the Coach Hiestand and how one of the things we've heard too, Vince, is, and I know you got to run here soon, but we've said this the other day, and I think it's worth noting now, is like one of the offensive linemen told another parent that I know that every day they wake up and there's a text from Coach Hiestand with some sort of motivational quote. And it's like, he's always done stuff like that. It's like, it's just, there's this false notion that people kind of tore him down to build up Jeff Quinn, which I freaking hate. But he's always been why do you think his players love him? Do you think it's just because Alex Bars loves Harry Hiestand? Well, got him ready. Alex Bars is an undrafted free agent. It's not like he turned him into a first-round draft pick. You know what I mean? And so they love him because they know he cares and he's going to get the most out of them. And I think if Blake is open to it, if Tosh is open to it, if Kristofik is open to it, if Rocco's open to it, if Joe Walt's open to it, you've got a chance. And just name all of them, Carmody, all of them, because there's talent there.
Yeah.
If they're open to taking that coaching, you're not going to ask a 60-year-old man to change who he is. Okay. It's up to, I'm tired of people saying all the grown-ups have to adapt to the children. No, the children need to adapt to the experience that grown-ups have had. Right.
Exactly.
And so if they can blend those two things, this line has a chance to be very good in a hurry. I don't think this is 2022 is going to be a bit of a rebuild, but 2023 is no. When you've got Blake Fisher, Jarrett Patterson, Josh Lugg, Joe Alt, Rocco Spindler, the freshman, Michael Carmody, Tosh Baker, and you've got a great line coach, there's no you need a year. There's no you need a year. 3, really, because the other GA, if he comes back, is really good reputation.
Yeah, exactly.
You do it now.
Right.
You should have a really good line now.
We're not going to be making a lot of excuses for the offensive line in 22.
Beyond game 3, I give them 3 games to work out some kinks. Beyond game 3,
you got a really hard one, and then you got 2 not layups, but like
beyond game 3 is when it's just like this year. Look, I'll give you a couple games to kind of work out the kinks, but then you got to get going. Right. And we do got Tommy Gunn's, Leonidas' Spartan kick. Mitchell is one of those Ohio ballers. Never said Ohio wasn't good, man. You're the only one that said Virginia wasn't ballers. Okay, that's kind of remember, man. So anyway, that's it for today. Lots of going on. We'll be back tomorrow. Got some interesting things I want to talk about tomorrow. I'm lining up a couple special guests here for the next week. We're gonna have some fun here moving forward. So hoping to have a former Notre Dame great supposedly going to join us here soon. A recent player and I are trying to figure out a schedule to record an interview to play during one of our shows. So really excited for what we got coming up. We'll be back tomorrow at 12. Well, tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. Yes. Ryan and I are going to break down film of Cooper Flanagan and Cedric Irvin Jr. Tomorrow, 12:30, same bat time, same bat channel, right? We're going to have another show. And then Friday, of course, we'll have our mailbag. Before the mailbag on Friday, however, at noon, we are going to be live for Preston Zinter's decision. He's going to announce between Notre Dame and several other schools. We will carry that live and then have immediate analysis afterwards of whatever his decision was. We'll talk about it, what it means for Notre Dame, one way or the other. So
cool.
So we'll definitely have that show. So anyway, so for Vince D'Addario, I'm Brian Driscoll. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Make sure you check out irishbreakdown.com. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share, buy some Built Bars, sign up for the message boards, and let's continue this conversation. And thank you so much for being a part of the Irish Breakdown podcast.